Welcome to another episode of the Talkin Talent podcast. Thank you for checking us out. Today's episode brings two guests who work together at WorldStrides, which is a leading educational travel company based here in Virginia. And we discuss the importance and skill behind identifying and elevating talent and putting your team in the best position to succeed. Really, really interesting conversation. Hope you enjoy listening and would love your feedback. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can go to the Cherry Beckert website in the section that focuses on our recruiting and search team. So, all right, let's get to it. I am very excited today. I'm joined by two guests, both who work at WorldStrides, a mission-driven, experiential education company founded in 1967, and their mission is to bringing students into this immersive learning experience. Over 10 million students in more than 120 countries. So WorldStrides is a very, very well-known company in the Washington, D.C. area. One of my guests lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. They have a big presence in Virginia in general, but are known across the world. WorldStrides is headquartered here. And so the two guests today, really excited. I am joined by Kristen Duckett and Jordan McLaughlin. Kristen is the Chief Human Resources Officer, and Jordan is the Vice President of Workforce Strategy. So, Kristen and Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah,
Great
excited
to
to
be
be
here.
here.
All right, we're going to get into a lot of this, and we're going to hear about your backgrounds, but give me your like 30 to 60-second elevator pitch, just to give everyone listening a little background on yourselves and how you've arrived at this point in your career.
Okay, I'll kick us off, Jordan. So I would say from an early age, I've always been drawn to people. It could be because I was the oldest of four. We moved around a lot when I was a child, but I've always been curious about people and their stories. And so HR has just been a natural fit for me. I didn't set out to be an HR leader, but that's kind of where I am today, and I love it. And I've had the opportunity to work at large, complex companies and learn great HR from places like Capital One and Hilton and Fannie Mae. And then I also have worked in very small, nimble environments. I built the HR structure at a small tech company before I joined WorldStrides. And they're different environments, but I would say the theme has always been the same: is look at how you can build great people infrastructure to allow people to do their best work. And that's what I'm doing here at WorldStrides today, and also helping the workforce prepare for the changing landscape and how work is evolving largely through AI.
Yeah, and I would say I got my HR chops early on in my life. My mom is a HR professor, so early on I did not want anything to do with HR. I thought if I follow in my mom's footsteps, I'm doomed. And here I am today. I'm in HR and loving every minute of it. But so I've grown up pretty creative and very artistic. So I wanted to go into marketing and graphic design early on. Found myself last minute in my college career, switching to HR, and that's where I jumped into recruiting, executive recruiting, in a nuclear power company, and been in recruiting ever since, and loved it. So I've had a career that spans all kinds of industries, from construction to finance at Genworth Financial, and retail at J. Crew, and even the medical field at UVA Hospital, and now here at WorldStrides. So a varying array of industries, all with different recruiting challenges. And I think that's kind of created a career that I look back on, I've learned a lot from, and given me a lot of perspective that I'm using today here at WorldStrides.
I forgot to make the connection that we both kind of cut our teeth in executive recruiting, and you obviously have led recruiting in many of your jobs, but that was a big, I would say, because a lot of your listeners, Sam, are in recruiting. I think that was such a foundational start for me in HR and that's kind of formed why I've been so focused on talent and people and people's stories. And so I think that those who kind of get their start in recruiting, I think often have a very successful HR career.
And I've said I started recruiting as an army brat on the playgrounds at school, trying to recruit new friends every time we move. So I've kind of considered myself also a lifelong recruiter, whether it's on the playground or in the corporate area.
Yeah, it's just dealing. You can learn at an early age how to deal with people, right? And that not everyone's a little bit different, and not everyone fits into this same box, and you have to work to figure out not only whether you're working with people internally to figure out what a hiring manager wants when they're hiring, but also, just because someone's resume looks a certain way, it doesn't mean that when you talk to them, it's gonna be extrapolated out into their work. So yeah, I was the complete opposite, in that I got into recruiting later in my career. The first 10 or 15 years were more, people have heard this before, but I would say I had jobs that were a little more operational in nature, consulting, some startup-y type companies that were very dispersed across the country. And I might have, titles like regional director of operations or operations this or that. And I was hiring a lot of people. And at the time, I was like, why are we not finding the right candidates? Why we don't have this robust recruiting operation? There's something missing. And so I got really interested through all those roles. At some point, I thought, I want to be the COO of a company, right? I got my MBA. I'm like, I was looking at a P&L, and then I realized I don't really care as much about that stuff as I do about figuring out, how do you match up, like how do you help people find the right jobs? And then once they're there, how do you keep them there? Are we paying them enough? Do we have the right benefits? Are they engaged? If they do leave, why do they leave? So then I made a transition. So you both started, and now I'm getting into later in life. But that's what's great about this, is that not everyone follows a linear path. So
Absolutely.
um, we're going to go down a few different paths today. But when I talked to Kristen a few weeks ago, this was really her idea, but we could probably talk about this for 2 hours if we wanted to. But the reason why Kristen and Jordan are both here is we want to discuss how leaders, so from Kristen's perspective, and certainly this can pertain to human resources, and it's going to today, but it can pertain to other roles too. How leaders can identify and spot talent and put people in the best position to thrive and succeed, which is a really difficult thing to do. So we're gonna start there. I'm gonna start with you, Kristen. You've been with WorldStrides for a little over a year now as the CHRO. You mentioned your background. You've worked in all kinds of different industries, and so have you, Jordan. Between the two of you, you've probably crossed a lot, crossed almost everything off the list.
Mhm.
Well, when you joined WorldStrides, how did you handle your first 3 to 6 months from understanding the organization and how your team was functioning? And what did you learn from your experiences in previous roles and how to handle that?
So when I joined WorldStrides, I recognized that it was a different industry. I've been in services businesses before, but it's actually a far more complex business than you realize from the outside. And so my first thought was, let me really understand the business. And so I went on a listening tour, met with many, many leaders across the company to understand, what is your role? What does your team do? What do they struggle with? What do they do really well? And then part of that also was from the HR perspective, what is HR doing that's really good for your team? What absolutely frustrates you today about HR, or what would you want us to be doing? And so in those conversations, three themes kind of came to light. The first was that we were deep in operational complexity, and that kind of crowded out any real strategy. And so we were so focused on the kind of bureaucratic day to day that it didn't allow us time to really plan ahead. And so a lot of fire drills, and that was frustrating. And this was through no fault of the HR team. I mean, I think some of you just find yourself in these positions, right? And then the second one was data and systems were really frustrating for people. We weren't known for having great HR systems, and we don't have a dedicated IT person, so we kind of have to be resourceful on our own. And so the systems that we were using were clunky, and people were not happy with them. And then third, I would say leaders really craved more proactive partnership. They wanted one single point of contact. They wanted one HR business partner who could kind of really support them. And so this led me to think we're probably in need of a restructuring. And so early on, I thought through that, and based on the feedback I got from leaders and also talking to the HR team, we did actually within the first 2 months move into a restructuring, which you could say was pretty quick. And I will admit, I think sometimes looking back, like the pace was fast. And I think if you ask some of my team, they would say we moved really fast. And one learning for me was just because something might seem obvious to you as a leader, it may be opaque to someone else, and you have to take the time to really explain it. And so we've actually since gone through a number of other reorgs since that time, but each time I think I'm getting better at really explaining and articulating the thinking, and then taking feedback, because sometimes you don't always get it right. And then the other thing I would say is just it's really important. It was important for me to try to build trust, but trust isn't something that you force. It comes from demonstrating, doing what you say you're going to do, being open to feedback. And so one of the big things I focused on was just trying to build that credibility and trust with the leadership team and then also with my own HR team.
That's something I've talked to multiple people about, and it's challenging because sometimes right, if you're interviewing with the leadership team and you're in your experience, Kristen, and they might have certain two, three, four, five things that they pick out that like here's what we're thinking over the next 30, 60, 90 days, year that we need that are large projects. And sometimes they're not sure, and you're coming in and you're having to figure it out yourself, or there's things that they didn't know about that you're coming in and your team is sharing, hey, we haven't done this in a year, or we haven't done this in 6 months, or we're really behind on this. So Jordan, from your perspective, um, what has your experience been, let's say, over the years, either prior to joining WorldStrides, with roles where you've had either very kind of strict or regimented responsibilities compared to times where now, and we're going to get into it, where you've been able to be a little bit more creative or innovative?
Yeah. I think naturally over my career, when you start off in a position, usually there's a lot more guardrails that are put in place, as you're learning and developing. And I would say I was, I was able to have those guardrails removed very early on in my career, which allowed me to have a lot more creativity early on. I won't say that there haven't been positions or places in my career where I've had full creativity. But I remember my first executive recruiting role was probably one of those opportunities that was a little scary because it was allowed for so much creativity and they expected me to be creative. I was 19, hiring executive CMOs for a Fortune 500 company, and I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was completely scared, but that was the reason they hired me. And so I think early on, I got exposure to leaders who allowed me to have that creativity, allowed me to break things within a controlled environment, to figure things out on my own, to mess up, make mistakes, and fail fast. And again, throughout my career, I've had varying opportunities of creative freedom. And I've been in positions again where I haven't had that creative freedom. And I think that's due to maybe leadership at the time. Industry also has a big impact on how creative you can be, right? I'll be honest, in a retail world where it's moving about 200 million miles an hour, you're holding on for dear life. You don't have a lot of time to be creative. And again, when you're moving that fast, sometimes creative risk can be a big downside. It can come at a big cost. And so, again, I think there's varying levels of creativity that I've had, but I would say over the last year and a half since Kristen's been here, I've found myself back to those early days of my career where I've had a lot of freedom of creativity. It's been one of those moments where I've had to pull back my 19-year-old self, executive recruiter self, and say, wow, I'm back in this moment of being able to come up with something somewhat crazy at times and seeing if it works or not. And I think that's been really exciting. But with that creativity, like I said, comes some risk. And so I think having a leader or leadership that allows you to take those calculated risks, be creative with an approach, see what sticks on the wall when you throw it against it, has been really freeing and ultimately led to some hopefully good payoffs. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and no, when I first talked with Kristen and she was talking about your background a bit and about how what you're doing now compared to what you did when you started,
Mhm.
you came to World Strides. I think your title was Director of Global Talent, and then that has morphed certainly into something more.
Mhm.
In this particular situation, was that something you initiated? Was this something that Kristen initiated? Tell me more about, and want to hear from Kristen too, but tell
Yeah.
me more about how that came to be.
I'm sure Kristen will tell you I'm always hungry and curious. So I would say I initiated in a roundabout way of just always hungry for more opportunity, more freedom of creativity, more freedom of decision making, things like that. So I would say that was my kind of initiation of exploring that route. Um, but yeah, so I mean, my role has changed. When I first started at World Strides, there was no real recruiting team. We had a couple people who had dabbled in recruiting. Recruiting was held by the HR business partners. Our team was half the size. We had just come out of COVID, and so for an education travel company, we had the double whammy, right, of impact. And so when I came into the role, it was very different. We were really focused on standing up something that had never been done before, i.e., recruiting, building an L&D team from the ground up at the time. And so once we got to that place, insert Kristen, she had the opportunity to kind of look at where we had come from over the last 2.5, 3 years at that point, and really see what we needed for this next chapter in our HR team. And I think that's where it opened up opportunities for me to take Kristen's direction and for her to place me in a new set of roles and responsibilities that our team had morphed into needing and the business needed. And so I would say it was partially organic, partially, driven by my just nature of always wanting to drive things forward and not being, I'm never happy with the status quo. I never like to look at something that's been done the same way for a week and think that it can't be reimagined. So I think Kristen saw that, and here we are today.
Is that your perspective too, Kristen, how that all played out?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also recognizing, let me think back to kind of some of the problems that I uncovered during my listening tour, knowing that HR systems and data was a gap for the company, knowing that it was a problem, seeing that you had actually, Jordan, done some work in this area unprompted. If we, as I mentioned, we didn't have a lot of IT support, so we had to be resourceful. And one of those things was you introduced Smartsheet to the company and built a lot of our different processes from that, which the HR team quickly adapted to and embraced. And in fact, other teams in the company even were seeking you out to help them build certain processes in Smartsheet. And so that, plus the fact that you made the business case before I joined to bring us onto a new ATS, Greenhouse, you have the aptitude. I mean, you demonstrated having the aptitude and the ambition to improve areas within the systems space. And so it seemed like a natural fit. And so the opportunity plus the demonstrated capability led me to make a more formal move and move HR systems under you, because I wanted that to be something that you truly owned and had kind of the remit for and the responsibility for. And I would say it actually worked out pretty well, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I know. We talked about it, Kristen, you and I talked about, and this is something that I discussed with lots of people, what do you already have internally in terms of systems or tech that everyone wants something new, but what do you already have that you don't have to pay any extra money for? There's no additional cost, and you can do it, and just need someone to take ownership of it, right? And if somebody especially raises their hand and enjoys it and wants to take it as opposed to being forced into it, that's really helpful. So it's also not common, right? People generally want to stay in their lane. You want to do, here's what my job description says. I don't want to take on more than that. But yeah, obviously Jordan felt really comfortable, early on to be able to have Kristen be able to give him that leeway and that cover to be able to try things. And yeah, if it works, it works. I'm sure there's things you tried that didn't work out, but that's okay too.
Nope, absolutely.
So Kristen, once those HR systems were kind of formally under Jordan's purview, what led you to bring him the idea for what became this comp platform? I know we haven't talked about that yet, but how did that conversation go?
So in addition to the restructuring, I also identified that there was a need for the company to have a more structured performance management approach. And so within a few months of joining, we moved quickly. Again, that kind of seems to be my theme here, but we moved quickly to make sure that we had it in place before the fall, which is when we would be kicking off performance management. So we put in place a new program that was a 1 to 5 rating scale. I think many of your listeners would understand that, have that at their own company. So nothing novel, but it allowed us to create more of a pay for performance approach, which was important. And in fact, it was, I think, readily embraced by the company. They were looking for some sort of structure. And so that went well. But then we had to move into the compensation sector of the year, and where we had to, do bonus decisioning and all of that. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a new performance management system, because we were using another platform that wasn't very popular, that allowed us to enter ratings and also show kind of the alignment between a rating and a payout, and have managers be able to make those decisions in the system. Wouldn't that be great, Jordan? And so that was kind of the genesis of the idea of, can we do that? Because he had already been doing a lot of vibe coding. He had been testing things out. So I thought, okay, you can probably build this, right? And then I think he kind of recognized that there was some reality setting in. So I'll turn it over to you, Jordan, because I think that the next part was really critical in terms of how you scope the work.
Yeah, and I want to pause before we kind of get into scoping the work. I think setting up the environment for this situation was really important, right? Kristen, I had identified early on. I mean, we're only about 9 months into Kristen being here at this point. And so early on to Kristen being here, I realized that she wasn't driven by ego. When she made a decision, she was always willing to pivot if the rationale makes sense, right? And I think having a leader that's saying, hey, I want a direction, but I'm willing to say it may not be the right direction and listen, I think is really important. So to kind of set up the environment that I was in really was a catalyst for success. But yeah, she had come to me with this idea of wanting a performance management system, and I love the idea, right? I still to this day think it's really a great idea. We're on the track to roll out a new performance management system. But in the moment, it was a really stressful time because we had this bonus merit coming up. Kristen had never gone through a cycle before. I had now gone through, I believe, 4 cycles of gnashing of the teeth, tears, frustration, a long process.
Lots of spreadsheets.
I think there was something like 300 plus spreadsheets we were having to consolidate into a
Oh my gosh.
single spreadsheet with the HR team, and having to make sure that everything balanced out to the penny, right? And so you can imagine for finance, for HR, for all kinds of managers who have control over their own spreadsheet formats got changed more times than we cared to count. I said, there has to be a better way, right? This process took us 3 months, upwards of 3 months to do, and it shouldn't. And so I said, Kristen, I think we have an opportunity here that's bigger than the win for performance management, and honestly reduces our risk down. And I think that's the balance, right? It's having the environment, but also understanding the balance of risk and payoff. And so the payoff would have been great for the performance management tool, but the risk would have far exceeded. If we messed that up, it would have impacted every single person in the company. Our timeline to build was short. Our runway to build was short. And so I said, let's scope it down, have a high impact tool, right? That shows and proves that we're capable of doing this work. And so we built it in a few weeks and rolled it out. It ended up taking a 3-month process down to roughly, what was it, about 2 weeks, week and a half, Kristen. And after every call with the finance team, the prior year having literal tears shed, this year we were laughing and joking. 30-minute calls ended up being 5 or 10-minute updates, and a much more enjoyable experience, which just proved that HR was capable. So our payoff ended up paying off, and we reduced that risk down, which was important. So.
And I would say, though, the big thing, though, and I think Jordan's underselling himself, this was a lift, though. I mean, he spent a lot of time on nights and weekends, I think, working on this to get it to production, because, you have a finite time. We have to get bonuses paid. We have to have everything decided by a certain time. So there was a bit of a time crunch. But one thing I will say is all the goodwill that goes into giving a talented person a platform to spring from and to do something really new and novel and fun and exciting can be lost if you move too fast and you're sloppy. So if we had tried to rush this through and didn't take the time to really make sure on the back end the system was secure, it would have been disastrous, because we're dealing with people's salaries, bonus amounts. If somehow leaders had been able to see all of that information, and the one thing we did, we only gave access to the leadership, so VP and above, because we wanted to contain it. I think going forward, we want to make sure we can kind of push that decisioning down into the organization. But even if the leadership team had been able to see each other's salaries, we would have lost credibility. We would have lost trust. And so by taking the time to build into that process, the amount of time it takes to work with IT and to work with finance to get them comfortable was really important. And so I would encourage leaders that are looking to give their teams platforms for growth. Make sure you marry the excitement and enthusiasm with a governance or some sort of process to allow you to make sure you're checking off all the boxes and you're not going too quickly that it ends up being a disaster. No one wants that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it all sounds right. It could sound great to both of you and to your team, but you all have all these managers who are responsible for all these people that are on their teams that are now going to have to learn something different. And any kind of change to people, even if people complain about the old process, right, and the spreadsheets and the manual work, when you have to learn something new, if it's not done right or there's holes in it, they're going to immediately back out or complain. There's going to be some backlash to it. I mean, it's that can pertain to many different things, but I've seen that a lot. So it sounds like it's done well. And I know, one thing that you referenced, it looks like Kristen, you might have referenced was one of the harder parts was getting finance on board. And I know sometimes with systems, when you're looking at all these different systems, I hear it a lot with Workday, are we doing this for HR? Is this an HR and finance together thing? Are we picking different parts of this? So Jordan, I think, you probably experienced with this. What did that look like in terms of the nights and the weekends and the energy, and what was the hardest part, and why, and why was it finance or, kind of the CFO group?
Yeah. I think I mean, finance is looking at the numbers. Every dollar that we misappropriate or we overpay someone is it's a battle to get that money back, to find that dollar from somewhere else. And so, they have a high stakes game that they are in charge of playing, right? And the same time HR is too, from the people, the culture, the talent. And so making sure, especially in this process, that we refine the culture and making sure that things are done right to build and maintain the trust of our team members from the HR perspective. Finance has the same responsibility with the numbers from the board and the executive team and our customers and our stakeholders, right? And so we really had to make sure that we had a process that was answering both calls at the same time. And so again, finance didn't have as much of they weren't vibe coding sitting there next to me. And so they really turned over a lot of trust into their responsibilities into this random person from HR now building a tech tool that's going to manage their budget. It was a little daunting. And so I will say that it really came from Kristen on, with her leadership on just building that trust with the finance team and saying, hey, we understand, we completely agree with the risk that you all have to mitigate. We see it, we hear it, we're going to build it into the platform, and we're going to prove to you along the way through regular touch bases that we're able to deliver a platform that addresses all your concerns. And then Kristen also saying, hey, we're going to put some trust into Jordan to do this. And it was a huge step forward for me in my career, and just having a boss that was able to put that trust in a big way to build a platform, being a random person from HR, right? But also being able to partner with one of our highest stakeholders, that being finance. And so I think it was a collective effort across the team to just trust each other. And I think trust was kind of the name of the game with this.
Anything to add there, Kristen?
The other thing I think that was really important was not only we were trying to simplify the process from the 300 spreadsheets down to a live system that people could actually go in and see the impact of their decisioning. And so I think that was the other thing, is like we're trying to upskill the capabilities of the organization. In the past, if you have a spreadsheet, it's static, right? You make a change, you can't see how it's impacting other things. And this system allowed you to kind of toggle and see how, okay, if I give this person more money, I'm going to have to take away over here. And I think that's really what we're trying to push some of the decision making back into the leadership hands to say, okay, you have ownership over this. How does that work? And so this tool not only simplified the process between HR and finance and even amongst the leaders, but it helps to kind of reinforce that leaders own their people decisions. HR is meant to kind of help facilitate and help guide, but ultimately they're the decision makers. And I think that was the goal really in this system, apart from the fact that we were trying to simplify and make everyone's lives a bit easier.
And I don't know if either of you had a chance to look at this, but about 6 months ago, I did a podcast episode with a chief people officer and a CFO together, not from the same company, two different companies. But one of the things that I hear a lot from, and it's usually people that are, Kristen, not quite at your level yet, but are at that like director through VP level and have maybe been in a small to mid-sized company and have reported to a CFO, as opposed to where you and the CFO are probably peers, right? At the level where you're operating at the same level. And WorldStrides is a much bigger company than some of these other ones. But the point being, if you're if HR and the people function is reporting up through a CFO or even a COO, and it's that you're not able to, yes, maybe some of your opinions and thoughts are taken into consideration, but at the end of the day, the CFO is making the decision. It's much, much harder to get people on board with something. So the fact that you at WorldStrides, at least that you're at the same level, you're operating in the same level, you're able to have a peer-to-peer conversation about this, to be able to not just talk about what's going on, but to lend it to help Jordan to be able to roll this out and not have it just be him going to the CFO and going, hey, I want to do all this interesting stuff, and there being no one else there to back him up. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think I will give credit to the leadership team. I think, our CEO, Dave, and the leadership team really value the impact of the people strategy, and they see how it has a direct impact on enabling business results. And so I'm fortunate to be on a team where that's valued. And so I'm not having to like kind of scream from the rooftops. I feel like, obviously it goes back to credibility. I have to have sound backing for why I'm proposing what I'm proposing, but there's a receptive audience, and they'll push back. I mean, that's the thing. I think that's what I value. It's not just, okay, great, you want to do that, let's do it. There is definitely pushback from our CFO, our CEO, our other leaders, but it's a healthy dialogue, and I think that's what makes, honestly, my job today so fun.
Yep.
Well, let's look at this from a more kind of a macro level, and all of this situation or this story, and what that kind of says about WorldStrides, and thinking about talent, versus the default of keeping people in their lane. So Kristen, share from your perspective, and whether that's, taking from past experiences that you have, give me your take. I know you have not been at WorldStrides forever, but you've done a lot and be able to create a lot of value in a short period of time.
Well, as I mentioned, I've been at different large companies. And in fact, when I was at Capital One, I had 3 different roles, all lateral moves. I'm a big believer in lateral moves. I went from executive recruiter to HR business partner to chief of staff for a tech part of the company. And I was given that opportunity from leaders who kind of saw something in me and said, okay, you've never done this job before, but okay, we'll put you in this job and see how it goes. And so I've taken that to heart since then, as I've become a leader over teams, is that if I see something in someone, it's exciting for me to say, okay, how can we actually take this and cultivate this in someone and give them a new opportunity? And so I've done that before. At my startup, I was able to take someone and put them in a new role, and with some guidance, obviously. I don't just throw them in the deep end, but that's always been kind of a theme for me. And then I would say, honestly, pre-AI, oftentimes it was, if someone demonstrated the skills, they had the initiative, then it was kind of a logical, okay, let's move you into a new role. Now, though, with AI, I mean, you can learn these skills and you can reinvent yourself. And I think that's actually what Jordan was able to do. I mean, the rapid evolution of his skills in AI and what he's been able to build has really been astounding. And I think, people who embrace the new technology and are able to kind of parlay it into a new opportunity for their career, it just takes kind of the leadership to recognize it. But I mean, I give Jordan all the credit in the world. I mean, he had the initiative, and he worked hard at building those skills.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I think, again, I was very fortunate to have leadership in place that kind of paved the way and knocked down some of the trees in the forest, for me to create my own path. And I understand that not everyone's there. We probably have listeners on this call that are listening and saying, I just don't have, my boss isn't bought into my learning, my development, my AI journey, if that's the path, right? And what I would say is, it's, be encouraged that you can create your own path, right? I was blessed to have a path semi created for me, but at the end of the day, before Kristen came, I still had to struggle to knock down some of those trees and those barriers in the forest so I could have a clearer path to walk. And so the opportunity to, learn so much, like Kristen mentioned, with AI and with tech, and pivot out of a recruiting role and into something new, I think is there. The opportunity is there for the people that have the desire for the most part, right? You just have to understand that there is a balance of risk and with creativity. And as long as you can balance that well, demonstrate that you're willing to understand and see that risk, right? It gives you more credibility that you can then build upon. And so I think that's really the important part is build your credibility, learn, and then continue from that platform that you built for yourself to continue to level up.
Well, Kristen, what happens to the team now? I know, you're going to have to, this is right. This is what you're talking about. This is a good situation to have. You're going to have to find, what the next iteration of this looks like, but, in terms of how cross training goes, but give me some, what are you thinking now about how you're going to, let's say, replace some of the things that Jordan was doing well that he may not be able to do anymore in this new position?
Well, and I mean, that's kind of the big takeaway, right? So I think Jordan's done such a great job in this role that other teams have come calling. And so I won't steal his thunder, but, he's going to now be leaving the HR team and joining a new team or product team in a new capacity. And I will say, like, it's such an honor, I think, to show that like HR is multifaceted, right? We're not just kind of stuck in our lane, and he's going to be kind of paving the way and really giving a great example to everyone in the company as he moves over to a new role in the next week or so. So it's going to be a big loss for HR, but I'm also super proud of him and the risk he's taking. Again, a calculated risk, but it's a new move, a new function for him. But it really just demonstrates that, with hard work and ingenuity and kind of a support network, you can do things differently in your career.
Well, congratulations, Jordan. That's
Thank
exciting.
you.
Well, looking forward to hearing, the next 6 months or a year, all the great things you're doing. And I think that's, I'll talk to mostly candidates, let's say, who are looking for a job, and they've been in the same industry for a long time, or they've been in the same kind of job for a while, and they get anxious about, I don't know, there's things I don't know about AI. I'm really good at compliance, but I'm not tech savvy, or it's the complete opposite. In companies that are, especially larger companies, if everyone was the same and everyone had the same mindset, that's not necessarily a good thing. You need people who have different skill sets, some people who are comfortable doing their thing, some people who have, think about work a different way. So it's not, in I guess in a perfect world, if everyone was incredibly overly ambitious and really wanted to work outside their job description and learn new skills, that would be good. But it's mixing all those pieces together, which is a difficult thing. But I'm glad I'm glad this one has turned into such a good success story. Well, as we kind of come to a close here, Kristen, I want to start with you. Whether it's someone in your position now or someone who's aspiring to be in a CHRO, CPO role, are there things that either advice you have or things that people should be doing differently when they spot someone who has certain capabilities, but was maybe hired to do something else? So, we're talking about Jordan here, but just as a more general advice for people who are listening, what are some kind of takeaways you have for them?
I think there's maybe three things I would leave you with. The first one is you have to know your team. You have to know what their motivations are, what their interests are, and also if they're in the right frame of mind and in the right place to receive a new opportunity, right? I mean, they have competing priorities going on in their life today where taking on something new actually wouldn't be exciting for them. It might be just too much and they're not ready. So you always say, like, you can't want it more for them. You can't want it for them. They have to want it themselves. And so if that's not there, then you don't want to push because you don't want to set someone up for failure. That's number one. So know your team really well and know what they want. Number two, I would say you have to be able to give them an opening. So it might be some people want to do something, but they're not really sure how to raise it, how to come about it. So, it might be something like where I'll say to someone, I see you kind of had an interest in compensation. You've raised it a couple times in meetings. Would you want to join this Tiger team? We're going to be standing up a new compensation program. And that can be like the entry point for them to then really maybe start to go deep on compensation, whereas before they didn't have that experience. So kind of give them the pathway and maybe kind of open the door for them to try something new. And then I think third is if you do that and it doesn't work out, you have to give them air cover because, they're taking a risk. they're trying something new. They may find that it's just not something they like to do, or they're actually not as good at it that they thought they might be. And so then maybe you walk it back and say, okay, let's try something different. Let's get, either go back to your role or try something, a different role. But you can't put it all on them because, I'm taking the risk too as the leader. And so it's kind of this joint trust, this partnership to say, hey, let's try something. I've got your back and we'll see how it goes. And I'm here to support you. So those are the three things I would encourage leaders to think about.
Yeah.
Jordan, how about you? Any last thoughts?
I think for me, it's don't kill curiosity. I think Kristen did a really great job at not killing curiosity on the team, right? Curiosity to pursue a new path, to try something new, to learn something new, right? That didn't fit within my job description per se. But she fostered curiosity through providing that air cover, through providing opportunities, through building trust, through laying out a vision. It allowed me to be curious in a safe space. And that's something that I took away. The second thing I'll add, and this is something that Kristen shared with me early on, I had a team member who was just a rock star. I kind of consider most of my team to be rock stars, but this person was going to a new team, and I was up, my stomach was just in knots about it. I was really like, man, I'm really going to lose this person. I'm going to lose a lot of talent. And Kristen said something that stuck with me. She said, it is a proud moment to be an exporter of talent. And it stuck with me. And I've watched not only Kristen say that, but now to do it has been really astounding. And so I would say those are my two takeaways. Don't kill curiosity and be proud to be an exporter of talent are two things that I'm taking away from my learning lessons being reporting to Kristen. Again, so thankful to still work alongside her in the HR team, just in a new capacity. But that's something that's going to definitely stick with me. I mean, just the short year and a half I've been able to work with her.
I couldn't agree more. I love the, being proud of being an exporter of talent. I won't go dive deeper into that, but I love that. Well, I really appreciate you both joining me. I know everyone's very, very busy, and I think this gives people a lot of things to think about. And I imagine, again, when we share this and this goes up on social media, I'm sure someone's going to look you up. Someone might reach out to you or go, "Hey, I have some questions about this." So be prepared for that. And I'm sure you'll both be very gracious about responding to those people. But again, really appreciate both of your times. I'm looking forward to checking in to see, Jordan, how you're doing, and Kristen, all the amazing things you do as you both continue your jobs here at WorldStrides.
Absolutely. Happy to talk to anyone who has questions. Welcome.
So,
all right. Thank you both. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Sam. It was a pleasure.
Bye.